for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you coming to the session, sticking around. I know, having been to many conferences, the last session can often be, when you look at the schedule and you're like, oh, I'm at the end, okay. We'll see how it goes at the end. My energy versus who's still here versus your energy. It's like this really kind of swampy triple Venn diagram of what's going on. Again, thank you for being here. My name is Andrew Bernier. I'm an assistant professor, and I focus on STEM and sustainability education in the curriculum instruction department at the School of Education at UC. My primary purpose at being UC, along with teaching teachers in our MED program, has actually been to overhaul a graduate certificate. And the graduate certificate has been in STEM, or in STEM teacher prep, basically. UC has offered this online graduate certificate for over a decade. And I wanted to take this session today just to talk about like what went into a modern teacher prep program versus what has historically been. And I want to give you all an insight as peers in this space of, okay, here's kind of where we're going, if you will, with STEM teacher education. And we had a table earlier today at the expo, and we were trying to say, hey, we're a reference program. This is the kind of like, here's what's going on when it comes to preparing our teachers right now in this space, particularly in a very popular area, online education. Okay. So when I was originally going through why we needed to overhaul a teacher certification program, this is what was going on. So the certificate we had was booming in popularity in mid-2015, 2016. We were seeing a lot of teachers, both in-service and pre-service teachers, signing up to be a part of this program. And then we just hit this cliff. And this is, pre-pandemic as well. When I went in and I was looking at this certificate program, which had not been touched in 10 years, had no real coherent direction. And it was more or less just a smattering of classes thrown together that was like, oh, these seem to be STEM related. Let's throw it together as something that we can sell and market, and then we'll call it a day. They just kind of let that be for 10 years, and as you can tell, it picked up well and then just kind of petered out, because as we found out, teachers in the field, from reflecting with their students, along with other exterior demands, were saying, this is kind of lacking in relevance these days. So it's one of those things where higher education kind of like dropped the ball, if you will, when it comes to how we prepare our teachers. And that actually was counter to what was happening in the landscape of online prep programs. So according to the Council of Graduate Schools, there was a decrease in master's level programs. And actually, that's a trend that's continuing still. So if you yourself are entertaining an MED or something like that, or maybe some of your younger peer teachers in your schools are doing the same thing, we're actually seeing a decline in enrollment in master's education's program, which is kind of concerning for our peers, whom we work with. However, at the same time, those graduate level certificates were taking off. So who here was in person during their, say, graduate level prep program versus online? You were in person, you were online. Okay, online's picking up steam because one, we're all working professionals. When I got my master's program, I was teaching all day long, and then I had like 20 minutes to go to the bathroom and get something to eat, and then I was in a room like this from 4 to 10 p.m. every Tuesday. And that's a great way to facilitate teacher burnout. Along with, it was hybrid, so it was both in person and online. So, but we've seen that at least that sort of accommodation is popular for people who are trying to advance their careers in this space. So that, we had that increase from 14.3% and even higher up into almost 25%. So while the master's level decreased, the graduate level certificates significantly increased. However, we were going in the complete opposite direction. So I was hired and I was like, okay, what's going on? What is a good mechanism? And actually at that time, right under the Biden administration taking over, there was a movement within a lot of the different agencies within the federal government that were actually starting to come together called convergence. Department Ed led this charge, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend you check out what this effort's going on. But basically, there was each of one of the departments had a team that pushed forward a strategic plan that focused on this idea of an interagency process for a collective STEM vision. And so, this idea of the co-STEM, led by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, with the different subcommittees of each office, they were coming together to create and implement the plan. And they started getting this idea of what is convergence within STEM education, convergence interagency working group. And so it was, what are the different needs of these different agencies from Department of Ed, Interior, Energy, Agriculture, EPA, whatever. Each were tasked like, okay, what is your STEM vision? How can we collaborate between these different agencies? And then how can we use this vision as a means of, particularly with National Science Foundation, of informing how we want STEM education, especially within teacher prep programs, to be informed. And so that's where this idea of this convergence education, and it goes up like this. And it is, I want to be pretty clear, it is mindful of what we all have probably been told what STEM is, and probably what you've been told in other sessions today, versus what is this new realization of where STEM education is going versus the prerogative that we are being given as educators to realize what that is. And so the first is driven by a specific and compelling problem. So no longer is it just strictly, say, career orientation, which is how STEM has often been posited for almost 2 decades. But as opposed to the question of, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now it's more about what problem do you want to solve? And letting students having a better means of articulating, because honestly, how many people think that, today's, or, best careers are going to still exist in 5 years? Or some of the hottest careers in 5 years even exist today? I mean, how many of you have actually heard something like that before? Right? That is incredibly true in our space. So it's this idea of needing to look at specific challenges, or even as opportunities, and looking at either as, the deep specific phenomena, is it an engineering problem, and I'm just gonna say or pressing societal needs. I think of and pressing societal needs as a combination of where science and society meet, and how can we help define how STEM exists in that space. So this deep integration, that gets more into that idea of across multiple disciplines. Complex socio-scientific problems cannot be solved by looking through one lens or mindset. How many of you are a science teacher? Social studies teacher, CTE, math? Who am I talking to?
We're STEM teachers.
You're just like a blanket STEM?
So we're all, I think all 3 of us are STEM.
Okay. Are you in your direct instruction? Are you like curricular coaches or?
I'm a STEM teacher and I teach K to 6 and special needs, all STEM.
Okay.
So I don't have a curriculum. I'm just doing standard based, but it's all STEM.
Do you, and I kind of want to extend this question to others as well. When you are going through your instruction, are you kind of like, okay, here's our math unit, here's our science unit, here is our tech unit? Or do you find yourself inherently trying to interweave these concepts into a more holistic?
Holistically weaving, okay. And you should talk to them too, because it's my first year, but I came from Gen Ed, so I do pull a lot of cross curriculum because I was teaching phonics and ELA and all this stuff like just last year, but I try and look at the standards where they're going and what they should know, and then interweave it into either what's seasonally appropriate, what they're interested in, you know what I mean?
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that idea of seasonally appropriate.
Yeah, I like to be nature-based, so.
Yeah, as your shirt would. And you said you're
high school science.
Okay, and do you, I mean, obviously you have standards-wise greater prerogative as far as, staying in your lane. Are you comfortable in getting to, say, the other disciplines? Do you have a top-down expectation of other people saying, can you do more interdisciplinary instruction?
I mean, unfortunately, I feel like the only real crossover that's really pushed right now at that level is reading. Like a push for literacy across all areas. So bringing that into science, bringing that into math, bringing that in everywhere.
Okay.
Because reading is such I'm in Kentucky, so reading is tested all the time. Reading's one of our scores that we are ranked on for the ACT, as opposed to science where we are not. So a lot of ours is literacy, not necessarily the integration of lots of.
Do you know if that
topics.
conversation goes in the reverse direction, as in the English lit teacher is being expected to bring science concepts into their readings? So,
I digress.
I know, well, I mean, well, that's 9 other sessions, so, but it's this idea of like, pressing on experts from different disciplines, especially when we get to like that secondary level where a lot of us are coming in from the more discipline-specific background. It's this idea of knowledge, theories, and expertise and data to create these comprehensive solutions, and that could be on a technical front from expertise, but then it's on us as STEM teachers to understand, okay, how does that percolate down into our teaching? How can we make sure that the relevancy of our instruction is reflective of what's going on in the modern world? Because a lot of times when we are provided curriculum, books, standards, that's already dated, sometimes significantly so, that is almost non-reflective of what's happening in the grander STEM professional landscape, at least. And then it is this notion, and this is, I think, what is foreign in ways to a lot of our K-12 counterparts, this idea of being transdisciplinary, looking at new frameworks, new structures, even paradigms, if you will, adopting new disciplines into our practice. I mean, I was a K-12 teacher for 6 years. I've taught every single grade from 6th to doctoral level. And it's pretty wild, the gap and discrepancy of what is expected of us as teachers within the K-12 sphere versus getting into higher ed post-secondary. And it's almost in ways a disservice. I'm not going to soapbox here for a moment, but it really is the resources that we're providing, the expectations that are given to us as educators in this space. And then a lot of that is also reflected in outdated prep programs, which is what my attempt with this certificate was. And if I didn't really articulate so much, this was specifically a 1 year, 15 credit graduate certificate that was meant to be as a complement to other master's programs. And so what I did was I looked around and I was thinking, okay, who else, university speaking or higher ed speaking, is actually working in this space that's being called for by these government agencies? I pulled out 3 specifically that are happening right now. So there's an integrative STEM education certificate from Lebanon Valley College. So they focus on this idea of what is the interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary practice for STEM to help educators be more mindful of tapping into other disciplines into their own work. And I like this last part of pulling in the real world connections. So what is that relevancy factor? The graduate certificate in E-STEM from the University of Texas at San Antonio. So this is looking at sustainable management in context of environmental sciences and natural resources, so E being environmental. And then the STEM instructional leader focused on lower grades graduate certificate from Johns Hopkins. And they're providing, and this is where we're seeing a lot more go with justice and equity movements, more equitable and accessible learning environments based on research, so more supportive of all students. So not just trying to hammer home the content discipline, but trying to meet students where they are based off their social cultural background, learning abilities, and so forth. So a broader approach to the broad spectrum of learners in which we serve in the communities that they come from. So before I came to University of Cincinnati, I was in Arizona. That's where I started teaching. I was plunked out in the desert to start my career, which was crazy. And I'm still thirsty because of it. But I formed partnerships with Arizona State. And then as I progressed into graduate school, I actually then was teaching graduate at ASU. And I was leaving the university right before the pandemic undertook, but I was part of this project at a couple of initial workshops, this idea of STEM futures. It was a National Science Foundation funded project, and you can check it out. It's really just, you can just type in Arizona State University STEM futures, and it's a lot. What they did was they convened dozens and dozens of university partners from across the country to look at this of an emerging framework of how can we start thinking about STEM in a different light for future outcomes, having that future visioning, future orientation for STEM education. In the description, the broader description they have, I pulled this one sentence out. Their charge to both higher education, but more importantly to teacher prep education prep programs as a higher ed servicer, This idea of the citizens of tomorrow must be better able to understand, discover, develop, and implement innovative and principled solutions. And this is getting to more of the complex STEM-infused problems, recognizing in more rapidly changing environments. So when we think about STEM activities that we're conducting, we can go, oh, yay, little, kits and labs and that sort of thing. What is that future charge that we're trying to think of our students as future change agents who are going to be needing to be more readily adaptable and resilient to whatever comes their way? Who told them that they were going to go entirely online for a year and a half, right? So the question is, learning environments, let alone potential industries that they might be entering. We as educators need to start thinking about these will become less predictable and more volatile. So they're broken into these different categories, this idea of types of knowledge. Foundational knowledge, this gets more into kind of more where we're comfortable. STEM disciplinary knowledge, core content, but now we're getting into more digital literacy and cross-disciplinary knowledge. Meta knowledge considers the skills and approaches of understanding how we think, thinking about how we think of the foundational knowledge, so we get more into problem solving, critical thinking, amping up our communication, collaboration, creativity, innovation. So making sure that we intentionally design in our instruction space for students to work. Not just assuming that it's happening, but clearly calling it out and identifying it in our instruction. And this is what's emerging now, this idea of the humanistic knowledge, that STEM is not just robotics and engineering, but these are people, and these are stories, and these are setbacks and challenges and successes and all the like. This idea that humanistic values of knowledge and action, life skills, job skills, leadership, cultural competence, ethical and emotional awareness. And that's not just for students, that's for you too. It's a recognition that you're a growing professional in this field that's trying to keep up and teach a discipline that's rapidly changing. And it's like, you might not be in the classroom for your entire professional career. There are increasingly diverse opportunities for you to flex your career options, and STEM is one of the best ways as a conduit for you to have different means of servicing students. It doesn't need to be directly in teacher education. So for our purposes, I want to see what I'm doing on time. I think I'm doing okay. We have what's known as the emergent themes and new framework. So this is when we were doing our analysis of other market programs along with what was happening in the greater field, we went into this notion of system ready. So we actually had to go through 3 different name rebrands because working with marketing departments is a fun thing. If you're watching this on video, I'm very sorry for saying that. But it is this idea of the STEM and Sustainable Education Graduate Certificate Program. It was just STEM teaching and learning. I would have passed on that immediately if I was going through a catalog of certificate titles, but now that sustainability is getting more traction, people can even argue against that. At least now this helps broaden what our approach is. I'm a big believer in systems thinking. Anybody use systems thinking, know systems thinking, do system? Anybody alive? No?
What do you mean by systems thinking?
Okay. So, systems thinking is basically this recognition that there are diverse components into most things that we do, and that each one of those components has a multitude of relationships. But basically, you think about the idea of the sum is greater than the whole, like parts of the whole. Man, I just slaughtered that line. I apologize. But it's that notion that when all the pieces are together, there's something greater than just the sum of its parts. And so when we think about systems thinking, we think about causal relationships, we think about feedback loops, we think about that type of interdisciplinary teaching and how relationships work or don't work to make the function go as a whole. Yeah. So a lot of times, and you guys may or may not know this, but we have reinforced very linear-based education, as in we introduce a concept, we put forth something for the student to make evidence of, they produce it, we assign some sort of score, and then we just go back to the next thing, and then it's objective or standard or whatever. We don't do a lot of revisiting and reinforcing and having a more holistic approach to what it is that we're teaching. We're just trying to check off a list of competencies and things that we got to get through. Which is why you get a lot of teacher burnout, because you make this big list, I have to get through all this throughout the year, versus like, no, here's this holistic idea, and we have to let students kind of manipulate what that is that works for them. So what I did is I approached this idea of system ready as a working framework for our certificate. Science, literacy, science, technology, engineering, math, sustainability, literacy, science, engineering, math. then resilience, employment, ability, diversity, and pedagogy. Oh, and I wanted to show you, these are all pictures from my classroom when I was a teacher. So I'm not just like some dude that has been living in academia for a while. I like to call this trench warfare in teaching. Like when I've been around other academics that never spent a day in their life in the K-12 classroom, I'm like, I don't know if I believe anything you've written or said. But like when I was tasked with redesigning the certificate, I thought deeply about my time with these students, deeply so. So I was a middle school science teacher for 2 years, but then I helped launch a sustainability program at a STEM magnet school. And so a lot of the lessons learned I had, the just gobs of failures that I went through that informed the success of my students at the end really helped articulate what was my learning lessons that was not provided to me via a program. How can I capture a lot of that from building a whole program into a prep program that might support other peoples that want to get into this space, whether you're in service or pre-service, or a community-based informal, non-formal educator. So for me, the first notion of system recognizes that idea of the content that we got to get through. Like there is still that. But I broke it down in sustainability. You know, there's a rapidly rising area of concern from teachers and students. Like, have you all heard of climate anxiety from your students? Yeah, a lot of kids right now have heightened levels of anxiety because of their fear of the world in which they're inheriting. Mm-hmm. Some of them even checked out because they think, well, what are we going to do? Because the generations before me really botched this. So it's a notion of recognizing, okay, let's not dwell on anxiety and problems per se, but we can recognize that our students are going through that, but now focusing on a more solutions orientation to our education. So not just teaching STEM for the sake of teaching STEM, but STEM to solve. And that's how sustainability can work as an umbrella approach to the 4 primary disciplines. And you can do STEM, STEAM, STEAM Plus, all those. Those are all kind of embedded here. Literacy is critical. This gets to more of the 21st century learning ideas. You know, citizenship embedded within STEM, digital literacy embedded in STEM. What is content ability? Content ability, and what I mean by content ability is you and your students' ability to create content, to disseminate content, to absorb content, to retain content, to adopt content to your own context. So it's no longer just memorizing and retaining, but what are the dynamics of what does that content mean to me, and then how can I be a prosumer, if you will, both produce and consume learning content, so that I can see myself as an active participant in these fields, rather just a recipient. Because a lot of times we just treat students as buckets to fill, and then we score them on how well or how poorly they filled their own bucket. That's not good on our end as an educator. Science, this is actually where we've done well typically as a certificate: inquiry, nature of science, lab, field based study, and also discourse in society. How well can they actually convey what they're learning in science within each other in different groups? Because as you all aware in the whole pandemic thing, we didn't do a great job as far as like having commonality and conversation with how to properly address microbiology and pathogens and that sort of thing. So knowing how to at least have articulate conversations on that front. Because that showed how poorly we as a society are able to actually have facilitative conversations about science. So making space for that as well. Not landing on a particular point, but being able to facilitate constructive dialogue. Technology, so balancing teaching with and about technology, getting teachers to be more comfortable with adapting and shifting to incorporate digital learning and digital technology. So we still have a lot of teachers who are quite averse from implementing digital technology tools into the classroom. So in our certificate, we are really pressing to have teachers practice freely available digital teaching tools as their own assignments to then turn around and use as their own instruction. Engineering, so we honor the engineering design process. We'll do modeling as best as we can, and also promote design thinking, which gets into notions of planning, architecture, drafting, that sort of thing, let alone say entrepreneurial spaces as well. We think about proof of concept, that sort of thing, and minimally viable products, whatever. So and then math. We actually at UC do have quite a robust math education program, and so we actually have tapped a couple of classes into that. We stress a lot of teaching through problem solving, conceptual mathematics, interdisciplinary, and non-routine mathematical equations and so The other half gets more into the softer skills, this idea of ready. This idea of tapping the competency and ability of, okay, we have our knowledge, but what are our abilities and dispositions that we need people in this space to have as they enter these fields? Resilience. Has anybody talked about how we need to make more resilient STEM professionals? Do you know how to make a more resilient STEM professional? Who might be like 12 when you have them?
About
Right?
resiliency in students.
Resiliency in students, right.
Building that.
And so the question is, how do you then articulate that within a STEM focus? You know?
Providing space for failure and celebrating failure, and like you said, not being linear, allowing them time to go back if they want to, or
Right.
just reflect on it. That, I think that since I'm new, like, the amount of sadness and frustration, I wasn't fully prepared, like, totally.
Yeah.
And then also the challenge of like, I built this, but I only have you for 50 minutes and now I have to tear it apart. Like, that's all of those emotions, I think I now realize is like a big part of my teaching process.
Yeah.
And that makes them more resilient and also makes things, you know, like you did it for the experience, you did it for the knowledge, you did it not necessarily for this like physical consumer, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
And
mean-
teach students who are, I'm a gifted intervention specialist, so the students I get, and I give them a little challenge that is meaningless, right? You know, it's not attached to a grade. When I first started teaching some of the kids, they knew that, and tears if they failed.
Yeah.
I mean, we've conditioned students that there is a very stark dichotomy of right and wrong, and how much that has creeped into not just the STEM fields, but how we measure success in is one of the biggest disservices that we could have done as educators. You know, particularly in like innovation spaces, you know, there is so much failure, but the failure is actually critical. Like if a student just aced it up front, that's actually more concerning to me than if a student, you know, had a couple failed iterations before they get to XYZ standard. Like, because they just memorized something and said this is good enough versus them going through the actual genuine process of learning. So the question is, how is it that we make space and build that capacity for both the student and the teachers? And then employment, like that has been the primary driver. When I came into the STEM education space in 2007, 2008, that was all I heard. How are we gonna make more engineers? How are we gonna make more coders? How are we gonna get a job in tech spaces because there's gonna be so many jobs, like jobs. Like that's literally all I heard as a teacher. I was like, is that why I signed up for this? Is that what this is for? And there is that demand. That's not something that we can ignore. But the question is, jobs is a very dynamic and fluid thing in and of itself. So how is it that we can make our students, one, be ready for a job, identify what that is, but to also be incredibly resilient when that job goes away, or that job requires really rapid retraining, or when industries merge, or a new skill set comes along? How can we make sure a student in STEM feels very comfortable with quick pivoting in these spaces? So that is the idea of, okay, there's a career trajectory, equipping the teachers and the students for success, for that ever-evolvingness, if you will, of our workspaces. And this is, as we know, increasingly volatile economies. You know, you think about what's happening with electric vehicles right now. There was a big stall, and now rapid acceleration, and now it might be slowing down again. It's like, imagine if you invest a lot of time into EVs as a professional, and you're like, I don't know if my job's gonna be existing in the next year or two. So, not only in technical aptitude, but also in career savviness. And that gets into ability, this idea of informed instruction, giving space for continuous practice and feedback, developing that of consistent and newly identified skills in STEM instruction and learning. So it really is on us to be as present. I mean, that's why we go to conferences like this, to make sure we have time for our own PD development, and how then we translate that to a student. I mean, job skills and readiness is gonna sound a lot different from a kid who's in 11th or 12th grade that doesn't wanna go to college versus a 6th grader who's like, I think building Tinker kits is cool, you know, or just spends their time on Minecraft. I don't know. Diversity is also critical. I mean, this is getting a big push to make sure that we are not leaving behind various populations of students, to make sure that places that have often overlooked or under-resourced are getting not just a fair shake, but an intentional allocation of resources compared to peers who have typically enjoyed these spaces. And not just the students, but the teachers as well, the schools and districts as a whole. And that's actually something that I've been intentional with the design is this, that there are STEM, not that it comes down from a singular source, but that the schools become more savvy and tapping into community partners who are practicing this in the space. Because if they're not getting it from top-down agencies, which is where we've typically bemoaned where we have not gotten resources, to be more savvy with those community partners and invite those STEM professionals into our space, and vice versa. And then pedagogy. As is already present in the STEM work, we have clearly facilitate and articulate instructional strategies that exhibit exemplary learning. So you think about your 5E lesson plan, you think about inquiry, play, place-based, project-based learning. Keep going with a lot of that and normalize that, if you will. Okay, does anyone know when this session ends? I should know.
3:05.
3:05?
Yeah.
Okay, good for me. I don't know if that's good for you to listen to me a bit more, but I just want to, now I'm going to just get into, okay, what the heck happened with our certificate? You know, what our goal was to be one of the most innovative programs in the region, if not the most innovative program in the region in this space. You know, we're trying to go almost from like a worst to first kind of thing. So this was our old course load. So integrating STEM into practice, improving instructional effectiveness. So I teach, this is the thing, I teach this class, and then these classes have more or less kind of gotten the boot. And so now we have these, integrating STEM into practice. We now have a STEM education sustainability, which I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment here. We still teach improving instructional effectiveness, which has a clinical experience for both in-service and community-based educators. We've combined classes to help reduce redundancies, and then we'll actually get, and then so we have, what was different was that you had to crank out through all these classes. Like it was just a standardized, this is it, this is what we got, this is what you're gonna do. We have so much more diverse and dynamic educators in the STEM space that this time we have 3 required classes, the first 3. So integrating STEM into practice, STEM and sustainability, and improving social effectiveness. And then you get to choose 2 of these. So now we have applications of interdisciplinary learning in STEM settings. So this is gonna be more people like in maker spaces, in labs, who do field-based work, like being able to be more dynamic out, and this is all online. So this is kind of a fun challenge on my end, is designing learning experiences for people who are in different settings. Mathematics is problem solving. This is coming from our math department. This has been a popular class. This is a brand new class, which is open to both our master's and doctoral students, and we're building this currently, called Movements in STEM Equity. So STEM has been around now as a discipline for 25 plus years, and it was a lot of like the white dudes. I mean, that's where STEM came from, was essentially NASA and trying to do the space race thing. And when you look at footage of that, it was all white guys. And STEM in the education space followed similar suit. It wasn't until recently where we've had massive movements. I mean, we had our award winner today of you know, Black Boys in STEM, right? You know, so you have minority pushes, you have indigenous pushes. That's actually, I had a lot of really cool experiences in the Phoenix area. We have 3 or 4 Native American tribes in the area, and they were doing a lot of work there. Same thing with girls in STEM. So a lot of populations that have been marginalized in this space are moving forward, and there's been a lot of interesting social intricacies in what that means. And so, but mostly for the betterment, for the field. And then we have applications and issues of teaching with technology. So this was a very just kind of like, standard, here's some tech tools. This is getting to a much more holistic recognition of how rapidly changing the spaces along with technological practice. So, you know, if you're more of the tech math, you can do these. If you're more science, you can do these. If you're focused on tech and equity, you can do these. So we wanted to give our participants more space to flex the elective programs along with hitting these top spaces. So this actually kind of gets a bit more to what I was speaking of, that applications and issues of teaching with technology, you know, providing an overview of increasing complex array of digital media and technology-based resources. The STEM and sustainable education explores the connections of and intersections of STEM and sustainability. We merged 2 classes to combine CI 7037, that investigating the technical conceptual application of STEM disciplines in lab and applied settings. you know, and we focus on the engineering design process, mathematical modeling in that one, so we try to bridge both the technical application and support your growth in that as a professional to then turn around and put that in the classroom. This one is reflecting the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion movement, this idea of movements in STEM equity, looking at both a historical take on what is STEM within social settings, but then also incorporating practical means to implement learning activities that is mindful of meeting the needs of diverse learners and groups and teachers, along with introducing diverse elements to people who have typically been the recipient of a very standardized STEM curriculum. So it serves both ways. And then this was actually our biggest, in my department, this was the biggest fight, which was fun. But, so we had a special ed class, that was a part of it. And the reason why we did special ed class is because this was the main home of universal design. Anybody UDL? Okay. So that was the primary home of where we introduced and practiced UDL. And we're like, you know what? It's kind of ridiculous that UDL is primarily focused in a singular class and a student may or may not take that class. We booted the class and we just took UDL and made that a core thematic objective throughout the entire certificate. So now it's like, if you look at the syllabus of any class, you should see how UDL is deployed within those learning objectives. So this course, you know, provides an overview of the principles of UDL used to design online and blended learning experiences that meets the needs of diverse learners. So it could be accelerated learners, it could be learners that need more support services, so forth. Okay, so here are our teaching and learning objectives. It's another bullet bonanza. So this is the idea of updating STEM for modern needs. You know, we really are trying to focus this idea of resilient and adaptable skill management, you know, and trying to impress on our teachers, like that needs to be a priority with your students. And that's not something that's gonna be called for in the standards. And so that's the thing where it's like, how can you make sure you design and be intentional about those, all the while you're still being expected to have some sort of standardized testing that gets X, Y, Z. Because it's this stuff that kind of goes by the wayside. And then you see kind of where our students are now. You know, reporting good scores versus quality of human production are two very different things. So we have this idea of building that skill development to navigate the increasingly uncertain environments, both instructionally speaking and what we're going to be putting our students into. We want to strengthen core subject knowledge to construct lessons by reinforcing that cross-contextual knowledge and cross-disciplinary knowledge. So when we try to approach STEM instruction in silos, you diminish the quality across the board. Versus if you are intentional with your learning team, you know, I love how you guys are like STEM as a whole, but like, you know, you said you are science.
High school science.
Right. Are you like by yourself trying to integrate literacy, or are you actually working with like your at grade level lit teachers to think about that cross integration?
I mean, they like, you know, we'll have our PD sessions or our PLCs over integrating vocabulary techniques and how to increase reading, but then we don't have collaborators at the science and social studies level, so it's like they try to give us ways to do it. It's just it's not always applicable in the setting that we have.
Gotcha.
And not always usable in the same way, and we don't have the resources in the science classroom to do it the way that they're doing it.
So basically you're kind of given this expectation, like go figure it out.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it, yes.
Okay. That's why I did this.
Yes.
Anyone else in a similar situation where you just kind of left to your own devices? Or do you actually coordinate with other team members? Who has a team?
I meet with them every week.
Do you feel it's constructive?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This will be my second year working with this team, and last year we implemented a lot of this in that I'm the math and science teacher, and I had a program called Design Lab that they were supposed to be working on.
Mm-hmm.
But we did that in Moline, Ohio, and it required them to do stuff in ELA from the research standpoint and all of that. So they were working on the project in my room, and then they would go to her room and work on the writing part.
Okay.
And the research, and then they would do also in social studies, they would touch base on things that they had to look at in the past and say, well, for example, one group was working on a travel size dialysis machine, whatnot.
Okay.
So for people, so they did the research on what the first dialysis machine looked like, and then how can they get this so that it's mobile, so that people that can't always make it to the hospital for dialysis, they would be able to do that. So they had to do that research part. So that was the first year that we really worked together to bring one project that all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were working on.
And how did you
together.
feel like the student learning outcomes emerged from that? How do you feel like the learning outcomes from students and their experience emerged from that project?
I think it was a great experience. They're asking to do it this year.
Okay,
So
because I'm pretty sure that demand for dialysis machines is not gonna go away
no,
anytime soon.
no, definitely.
Right.
So they're as a whole, that was just one of the projects. They came up with so many different projects, and we just kind of carried it on too, because we did a program called Design Lab where they had to design a gathering space, but then they had to show like all of the things that we've gone through with COVID and whatnot, and just now getting back what things that they have to put in place now
Mhm.
after that. So again, they were doing the research, and some of them found out that this wasn't our first bout with quote unquote COVID, so they were looking into that. And then in the ELA part, they were writing up their papers for those different areas that they were designing their building for. So
That's awesome.
and they're asking to do it again.
So you had a common project,
Yeah.
you know, that was a mutual agreement, focal point for your team, and then you were allowing each teacher to kind of flex in their space and help support a common objective
Yep.
with their, see, like that, and that's that intentional approach that most teachers don't get and don't have. And so it's those kind of intricate projects, the interjections of increasing that interdisciplinary knowledge and practice that we're trying to get at and normalize that essentially. Because believe it or not, like that is a heightened level of teacher practice. Like it takes teachers sometimes years to be like, oh, this is an option, and then how good are we at that option? So good for you, good for your team. And getting back to this idea of foundational skills and systems thinking. Systems thinking is a core construct of sustainability, defaulting to project-based applications and improving digital literacy for those safe, effective use across educational environments. I mentioned before about like, I'm big on using digital tools for my own students, so I teach teachers in their practice, then turn around and help you implement those with their students. And then become this proficient evidence-based practices and using skills, monitoring student development, enhance learning, and make curriculum adjustments when necessary. That's just good practice, and we try to do that a lot in our 70-10 Improving Instructional Effectiveness class. Okay, so but now we're broadening our inclusion. So if the first 4 were about what we're supposed to teach, this is now being able to continuously deploy UDL and 21st century skills to maximize both accessibility and relevancy for all learners that is developmentally appropriate. It's loaded, there's a lot of things going on there, but basically meet kids where they are. Adopt community assets. So this is something I've been pushing a lot, this idea of local to you. Most online programs, you just get bludgeoned with whatever they're gonna say. I've made it an imperative component of my online teaching that I want you to go tell me stories and resources around where you are. I mean, even in the UC, I've had students from Egypt, Colorado, South Africa, like I've been to Colorado, but I don't know those landscapes, and most online programs don't create a prerogative for those students to tap into those resources as well. So right now, I have an assignment where in my sustainability class, I want my students to go interview someone in a position of a community-based educator. 25-minute conversation about the history and development and vision of what that place is. Basically, I just want you to go talk to somebody that's not just one of your other teachers. Apply social justice, equity-oriented pedagogy to the development of lessons and materials that encourage and embrace student and classroom diversity. And then we are critically reflecting on assumptions and seek transformative change in STEM by challenging dominant narratives that perpetuate systemic oppression in teaching and learning. So, as we know, those who control the curriculum and the design of curriculum are oftentimes putting forth either very blatant or hidden agendas You know, and this has been well documented in textbooks and standards, you know, whoever holds the strings in the Department of Ed and when they ever given state. So it's being intentional as an educator to think of critically about, okay, why is this what I have to, what I'm being expected to teach? You know, what is the pressure being put on me in a standardized test? That sort of thing. Okay, so yeah, this took me so long to, it wasn't even so much building the site, it was just navigating the different bureaucracy of higher education. But we are live. This is a STEM and education certificate, and so I actually have, I'm gonna go to here. So, you know, this is, when you visit our site, this is what you see. We have an overview of the certificate. Again, I put the local to you notion here. We're really trying to push that along. You know, potential careers that we've thought about, who would be wise to, you know, who we think would be well served by this. You know, we have teachers whom we have typically provided, like as a school of education, we've almost exclusively focused on teachers. And when they brought me on board to think about how can we improve the enrollment of this, I'm like, well, you need to broaden your understanding of who is an educator, particularly in the STEM space. You know, we have CTE teachers, but you have curriculum coaches, administrators, but you have the folks at the zoo, you've got the folks at the parks, you've got the folks at the museums. You know, and then you think about who is actually working in curriculum textbook offices and that sort of thing. So imagine if someone who is trying to write a textbook has a better understanding of STEM equity and outcomes. And how does that then percolate into an assigned textbook so that when you go and devise your assignments and try to appease the test, hey, someone maybe have had a better understanding and imperative to actually incorporate some of these STEM learning outcomes. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how many libraries I've been to. It's like, oh, look at our cool little maker space. It's like, okay, what was the training and the support that you got for that? You know, where did that come from? And maybe the large university institution in town should be able to have that service to you. We do showcase the curriculum. You know, you can go online and check that all out, which is all here. So if you forgot what classes were they are, here they are. Again, required and elective. And we, you know, admission requirements, basically you have a bachelor's and that sort of thing. We are offering, you know, these classes roll over into the MED. I'm not like pitching this to you, but this is more about what is the strategic initiative for us to make sure this best serves students. And by servants, I mean servants. Wow. Okay. Students and, well, you know, in service to your educating teachers. I mean, when we table, when I was an in-service teacher, a lot of it was like, I just need to get credit hours. I just need to get a degree. I don't want to burn any more time being in front of a computer and away from my family. You know, it was a very extrinsic, transactional relationship, you know, and a lot of us approach our own development in that way. A lot of us are like, I just need to get 15 to 30 credit hours or PD hours per year to just keep admin off my back. Anybody feel that way? Some of us do. You know, when a PD session goes south, like, oh, I'm just gonna get 2 hours out of this and get out of here. Which is how you might feel about this session right now. But I mean, I've been subjected to a lot of things. You know, but what's actually nice is that my administration is really trying to push the success of this program, and we're offering, was it like 30% off on tuition dollars right now. So it's one of the things that we're trying to get out there and help advance this. I want to introduce you to one of my classes. Where did my presentation? Here we go. So this is just a screenshot of my STEM and sustainability class from her slide. So anybody have used Canvas before? Been in Canvas? Okay. You know, so when you get there, here's a dumb video that I made that says hello. I'm really big in like videos, but not like long lectures like this, but just like, here's 6 minutes. Here's what's up. Like, come in with this mindset. Here's the outcome. Have fun. You know, and it's meant to. I'm trying to be as encouraging to you all to flex and integrate your learning space and your style and have that emerge into your creation for the assignment. So not only are you getting practice with digital tools, like I'm gonna ask you to write 1, maybe 2 papers a class, whereas like most master's classes, you're gonna have to crank out 3, 4, 5 of those things. I'm like, that's not STEM. You know, that's good for masters in APA and all the like, but like I want you to be able to practice a tool that's emerging and turn around. So actually one of the things that we did, it's my Okay, yeah, I'm just about wrapped here. Is we use, as you can tell, we're in the Microsoft suite. One of the cool apps that is part of Microsoft is Sway. Anybody familiar with Sway? So, ever been to like a website, but it's just one long, continuous scrolling website. It's not a bunch of pages. So, in a quasi nod to a portfolio, when I was a teacher, I kept thinking about, okay, transferable next steps for my career. I didn't think of myself on a career lifer. But one of the things that I'm trying to impress upon my colleagues is that, look, teaching is one of the most rad foundational jobs you can have for a career. The transferability of skills and the dispositions you have as far as leadership and coaching others is so broadly applicable. You should showcase that. You should showcase your learned work. Let alone if you want to progress in leadership within education or diversify your services beyond, say, an in-service classroom. I want to keep as much teachers in the classroom for, we have all the retention problems in the world anyway, but knowing that that's not the reality for a lot of folks, but to attract people to our career to our field is critical to at least have a foundational, strong career. And I think being able to showcase yourself as a learning, working professional is critical. So one of the things that we do is these sways, and so not only do they submit work in Canvas, but they also put together these, I got all permissions for this, ways to actually showcase our students' personal experience with learning, where they're coming into it. So, this is a preschool teacher for a while. She's gone back home to work with the kids, but she's now gearing up to come back into the classroom, and she's now integrating the assignments into the class. So the very first one was looking at an educational timeline for conservation. And so, teaching her how to, we did this in Canva. No, this is not letting me scroll anyway. Oh, you can scroll. So looking at a local organization, anyone who was in the last presentation of the Kentucky Education Alliance, they put together a presentation connecting NAAW, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Environmental Education, the Cincinnati Nature Center. So that's the program of, hey, find a resource local to you, dive deep into what they do and what makes them good, and then apply that to our learning objectives for this class. We look at historical perspectives in this one, but I also wanted them to project in the future. Hey, what do you think is going to happen in this field? What needs to happen as far as STEM, or in this case, environmental education?
So are you saying that you can look at other universities and tell you guys, hey, I saw this, and we're able to plug that into the master's program that you see, or did you?
I'm not sure.
What do you mean? What did you?
Like just now?
Yeah.
What do you mean? I'm sorry. I'm
You
guessing.
said apply it to. So you're talking about just apply it to our teaching in general, not.
This is primarily an educator prep program, and so my hope is that, here is a digital tool to make a timeline. She used Canva, but they could have also done it in the Microsoft app. And the Canva tool is free. So it's like, if you want to do a timeline assignment with your students, here's something that you can use to help, look at historical, current, and then future projections of what's happening with a given issue. It could be, if you want to say, look at the engineering grand challenges, which is a great way of approaching engineering lessons. Here's the historical, like nitrogen fixation is one of them. Like, what are we going to do about the nitrogen cycle? That's one of the engineering grand challenges, and that's a national organization. You can look at the historical issues, modern solutions, and then what are the perils of fixing, of letting nitrogen get out of hand, or fixing it, and having students do that type of mapping on a timeline and visualizing that data is critical. Same thing here with this causal map. Learning how to do, when we think about systems thinking, there's ways of visualizing systems thinking, the multitude of relationships of integrated components. Anybody see a flow map or anything like this before? Okay, learning how to build these things and organize in such a way that's clear and coherent is really important as far as deciphering information. I had another student here, but I'm starting to run out of time. This guy I like because he's just like a football player, and he's like, oh, I'm going to be a science teacher, and I'm like, great. But he did the, here's his timeline, his causal map, another one which I thought was much stronger. But he went to a local park, and he was looking at a STEM place-based lab integration. So I wanted them to focus on place-based learning for STEM outcomes. And he went to this local creek. And then applied standards, and then looked at this, applied a lesson here. I had him do a script for a lesson, and I wanted him to actually make either a collage or a video. And then, so he did, here's all this step, and then here were different pictures he took around his house doing. Maybe if anyone was in the last session, they talked about water collection integration. Like, here is that of him practicing the lesson before going and trying to do it with his students. So anyway, it's a means of like, I'm not just gonna submit the assignment and do it with the kids and call it a day. I'm gonna showcase this learning as a growing professional. Okay, and then that's it. Thank you for the time. I wanted to see if you had questions with this. This is the first semester that we have pushed this, so it is still very much fair game for modifications and changes. I talked to a lot of teachers before this, and this is where I wound up. I am in front of more teachers now, so if you're like, this sounds like a bunch of trash, get rid of it, I will consider that, versus this is cool, wish I had that, I will also warmly receive that as well. So, thank you.
How many students do you have in it right now?
Well, it's funny, the amount of students enrolled specifically is small, but the amount of students who are in the classes is much larger. So I imagine some of those students will formally enroll into the program. But we're starting to get, we literally have just started marketing this thing. So it's existed in our curriculum, but we haven't made like a push yet. This is actually one of the very first public, here it is moments for this certificate. So, or you just like, need to know that this exists in my community. See you later. Yes.
So this is all online, right?
Yes.
So I guess one of the questions I have is about integrating technologies, integrating different learning types. Like, is there any discussion about building some of that into in-person instruction as well? Is this is this like a separate laboratory level for that kind of?
Oh, I know. That has been. I was an in-person teacher for ages. Particularly, I was a CTE teacher, very hands-on tools and so forth, and now being tasked with a strictly online program.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm trying to think of like, okay, here's a makerspace, right? Here are some of the tools that can become like. Please take time to figure out where these resources are in your community. It could be a library, it could be a local school or something like that. Like, please go to that space. Please take pictures with a lesson in hand and see if this is something that's applicable for your students. So I'm literally trying to transform assignments away from, please participate in this read these 3 articles and participate in the discussion board call today, versus like, go out there and see how this physically works for you. Because that's the thing, it's like, since I'm literally warmly receiving anyone from anywhere, I need to be able to be like, all right, I don't know what you're working with. I can tell you what these tools are, but I need you to feel comfortable with what you have available to you. And the first step is identifying where that is and to what purpose you're going to go there for. So that's how I've found to direct teaching and learning objectives thus far. But I know, like you see, we have free access to, all students and faculty have access to our resources. I would say 80% of our students are regional. So I try to encourage that now. So that's where we're at. It's very fluid. Yeah.
All UC students have access to the Information Hub?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like new UC students?
Yeah, by being a student at UC, they will have access to the Innovation Center, the Innovation Hub, or the Makerspace. But the point of like what's available to you locally, local Cincinnati could, you could be an hour away,
Yeah.
and that's not convenient at all.
Right.
So I think, even if, to ask a student who resides on campus if we're convenient for an hour or a mile away from campus, that is not convenient. So it's really a question of like, what do you have access to? And then, I think that, part of my question is like gauging how deep or how far that would go within the rest of the curriculum.
Mhm.
I think that finding the resources that are local to you where you're at
And that's where online ed really just never got it right,
Yeah.
you know? And that's where online education became much more transactional, to say I got a degree from wherever,
Mhm.
to then like actually be an empowerment mechanism to support educators where they are. Or to then call out, you don't have the resources around you. And that is now an equity issue. And how, you know, and here are potential tools to start addressing that, even if you don't have the technical capacity around you. So it is that, you know, that systems thinking, that dynamic of like, here's how these impact each other. And so if you are a STEM educator that's supposed to serve a population that's under-resourced or XYZ, this certificate's gonna at least help you navigate these spaces. I mean, my last question to all of you, and I know it's past time, but like, how many of you went through a formal STEM teacher prep program? How many of you have relied on a different background to then self-integrate STEM into your teaching? I was an environmental studies major, and then I just got plunked into a classroom via Teach for America, and it's like totally, you know, so that has helped inform me is that in a teacher prep program, this is not an expectation. And so this is meant to help complement and bolster, and you know, I've had a lot of people like, well, I already have a master's degree, and I'm like, cool. I know this is a whole thing in cost and credits and whatever, but like this is how we need to start approaching modern STEM education, let alone future STEM education. So, thanks all. I know we're over time, but I appreciate it.
When you leave, make sure you're signed in. This is how you get your credit hours. This is the last session of the day, so fill out the session feedback, but also the overall conference feedback. If you don't want to do that right now,